After 4 months of total disappearance, Carlos Alcaraz has finally stepped back onto the US Open hard courts. But the celebratory narrative you are seeing all over social media is hiding a terrifying reality. Look at the viral training footage from Flushing Meadows this week. You see exactly what the mainstream media wants you to see. Behind the custom Jordan kit and the trademark grin lies a 22-year-old generational phenomenon. He is casually walking back into Arthur Ashe Stadium, taking selfies with 20,000 screaming fans and posting two simple words to millions of followers: "I'm back." The tennis world exhaled a massive sigh of relief. Millions of casual fans assumed the hard part was over. They genuinely believe that because Carlos is standing on a tennis court holding a racket, the defending champion has returned to effortlessly dismantle the competition. They are completely wrong. There is a massive, unforgiving difference between being medically cleared to hit a tennis ball in practice and being ready to survive the most physically violent tournament in world sport. What the headlines are intentionally ignoring is that Carlos Alcaraz is walking blindfolded into the single most dangerous tactical trap of his entire professional career. When an elite athlete returns from a catastrophic 4-month upper extremity injury, there is a rigid, non-negotiable rulebook. You take a wild card into a smaller ATP 250 event. You hide on the quiet back courts. You grind out low-stakes, 2 out of 3 set matches where the pressure is zero and you can misjudge a ball by 2 inches and still survive. You spend weeks slowly rebuilding match stamina against live, unpredictable incoming pace. Carlos Alcaraz just took that rulebook and set it on fire. By withdrawing from Cincinnati at the 11th hour, he eliminated his final safety net. That means his very first competitive match since April will not be a test run. It will be best of 5 sets. It will be in the suffocating 90-degree humidity of New York City. And it will be across the net from an opponent whose entire season has been dedicated to hunting for blood on hard courts. The last time a top 5 player attempted this exact gamble, the results were devastating. Right now, Juan Carlos Ferrero knows a secret that the cheering crowds do not. If one specific mechanism in his right arm fails under live tournament stress, it could permanently alter the trajectory of his entire career. And there is exactly one way to know if that mechanism is going to hold. But to see it, you have to know where to look. To understand why this New York return is such an unprecedented gamble, you have to look at what was stolen from Carlos Alcaraz over the last 4 months. In the early spring, Carlos was playing tennis from an entirely different dimension. He had arrived in Melbourne, dismantled the field, and captured the Australian Open, completing a historic career Grand Slam at just 22 years of age. He wasn't just winning titles, he was re-architecting how modern tennis was played. His blend of raw track speed, concussive baseline power, and delicate touch at the net had established him as the undisputed apex predator of the ATP Tour. Then, during an intense preparation block heading into the European clay swing, the right wrist gave out. In professional tennis, a joint injury is a death sentence for timing. An ankle tear limits your court coverage. An abdominal strain hurts your serve. But the wrist is the central processor of the entire stroke. Every single shot in the Alcaraz arsenal, the 100-mile-per-hour forehand that explodes off the court, the disguised drop shot struck with late supination, the kick serve that pulls opponents into the stands, relies entirely on the violent, microsecond flick of that arm. When the medical team delivered the diagnosis, the calculation was grim. He could attempt a cortisone-fueled push through Roland Garros and Wimbledon, risking permanent structural damage to the tendon sheath. Alternatively, he could shut down his entire season, surrender thousands of ranking points, and watch from his living room as his fiercest rivals carved up the tennis landscape. Choosing the sidelines was the only safe option, and the cost was catastrophic. Week after week, the tour moved on without him. The ATP Tour is an unsympathetic machine. It does not pause for greatness. While Carlos sat in rehabilitation clinics in Spain doing isometric band work, grip strength therapy, and non-impact conditioning, the rest of the tour spent the summer sharpening their games in live tournament fire. Jannik Sinner consolidated his grip on the tour, racking up match wins and dialing in baseline patterns with machine-like precision. Alexander Zverev and Daniil Medvedev spent 12 relentless weeks adapting their bodies to high-pressure tiebreaks, 5-set physical thresholds, and the brutal reality of summer hardcourt heat. Here is what casual viewers do not understand. Match sharpness cannot be simulated in practice. You cannot replicate the neural stress of reading a 138-mile-per-hour serve when the server completely disguises the ball toss. You cannot practice the split-second footwork adjustment needed on a dead net cord ball when your heart rate is redlining at 185 beats per minute in the fifth set. It is the instinctive split-second decision to pull the trigger on a down-the-line winner on breakpoint down. It requires doing so without a single microsecond of hesitation entering your mind. Look closely at his New York practice sessions this week. Visually, the foot speed looks electric. The trademark smile is back. But notice the structure: short, controlled four-shot drills, frequent breaks, careful management of ball weight. His camp openly debated shutting down the remainder of the season entirely, protecting his ranking under injury provisions, preserving his body, and returning at 100% in Melbourne next January. He rejected that path outright. Instead, he chose to throw himself into the most volatile physical Grand Slam on earth with zero match practice. Because for Carlos Alcaraz, Arthur Ashe Stadium is not just another stop on the tour. This is the stadium where he became a Grand Slam champion in 2022. This is the court where he defended his crown in 2025. He believes the New York crowd can give him what his body hasn't had time to build. But the tennis court is an unforgiving place. And there are 3 specific physical tests he cannot escape. When Carlos Alcaraz steps onto the court for round 1, throw away the hype. There are 3 hyper-specific technical vulnerabilities that his opponents will attack relentlessly. If even one of these 3 elements fails under live tournament stress, the entire campaign collapses. The Carlos Alcaraz forehand is the most explosive shot in modern tennis. But its destructive power is entirely dependent on an extreme biomechanical motion known as wrist lag and whip. As Carlos prepares to hit a forehand, he drops the racket head significantly below the ball, laying his right hand back into deep, hyperextended radial deviation. At the point of forward acceleration, the joint acts like a loaded catapult. In a fraction of a millisecond, the wrist transitions from maximum extension to violent internal pronation, generating over 3,200 RPMs of topspin at speeds over 100 miles per hour. In practice, against clean, waist-high balls fed directly into his strike zone, the tendon can handle that stress comfortably. The kinetic chain is predictable, smooth, and rhythmic. The real test occurs on the dead run. Imagine this scenario. An opponent drives a deep, heavy, flat return directly into Alcaraz's right hip. Carlos is forced to backpedal, off balance, reaching behind his body at full stretch. He cannot use his legs or core to generate power. He must rely entirely on the right wrist to flick the ball from below the level of the net and create enough spin to keep it inside the baseline. Under tournament conditions, when the ball is heavy and the court is slick, that sudden eccentric load on a rehabilitated joint produces massive structural shock. If Carlos feels even a micro twinge of hesitation, if his brain tells him to protect the joint by flattening out his swing or pulling off the ball early, the forehand loses its depth. The moment Alcaraz leaves a forehand short in the middle of the court at Flushing Meadows, the tour's elite players will punish him instantly. The second vulnerability lies in his service motion. Over the past 2 seasons, Alcaraz transformed his serve into a genuine offensive weapon by refining his trophy position and maximizing the upward explosion through his shoulder and snap. Here is what sports medicine tells us. The most dangerous part of a serve isn't the hit itself. It's the deceleration phase. When an athlete swings at 128 miles per hour, the flexors must absorb hundreds of pounds of stopping force in a split second. When players return from joint layoffs, their natural instinct is self-preservation. They subconsciously take 3 to 5 miles per hour off their delivery to avoid the violent shock of the follow-through. Instead of serving at 128 miles per hour with pinpoint location down the tee, the serve drops to 121 miles per hour and floats into the hitting zone. That 7-mile-per-hour difference completely alters the tactical dynamic of his service games. If Carlos cannot generate cheap, unreturnable first serves, he is forced into extended, physically exhausting 10-shot baseline duels on every single point. In a best-of-5 set match in the New York humidity, Having to play 5 extra shots per service game will drain his physical reserves and place unsustainable demands on his conditioning. The final and most overlooked hurdle is reflex timing on the return of serve. Carlos Alcaraz does not return serve like a traditional baseline grinder. He does not stand 10 feet behind the baseline to chip the ball safely back into play. He steps inside the baseline. He attacks the ball at the absolute top of the bounce, taking away the server's recovery time and turning defensive positions into outright winners within 2 seconds of the point starting. This style of hyper-aggressive returning requires the fastest, most delicate reflexes in modern sport. You have less than 400 milliseconds to identify the toss, read the spin off the strings, step forward, align the racket face, and strike the ball with precision. 4 months away from live tour serving dulls that reflex by 20 to 30 milliseconds. In professional tennis, an extra 30 milliseconds of delay is the difference between crushing a clean winner down the line and framing the ball into the upper deck. If his timing is off by a hair, he will be forced deep behind the baseline, forfeiting court position and allowing his opponents to dictate play from the center of the court. So, where does that leave the defending champion? If this tournament were being played anywhere else on the planet, in London, in Paris, in Turin, or in Shanghai, the analytical conclusion would be simple. Carlos Alcaraz does not have the match conditioning to survive 7 rounds. The physical demands are simply too severe. The tactical rust is too real. The lack of preparation matches is a mathematical disadvantage that almost no player in the Open era has overcome. Except this isn't anywhere else. This is Arthur Ashe Stadium. This is Flushing Meadows. Arthur Ashe Stadium does not operate on normal tennis logic. It is the loudest, most chaotic, most gladiatorial arena in sports. Other players step onto that court and feel paralyzed by the 23,000 screaming fans. Carlos Alcaraz steps onto that court and feeds on it like high-octane fuel. When he won here in 2022, he didn't do it with flawless, clean tennis. He did it by surviving 3 consecutive 5-set wars, staying on court until 3 in the morning, and pulling off shots that defied biomechanics simply because the stadium demanded it. He could have protected his ranking. He could have rested until next season while others fought for his crown. Instead, he came to New York without a safety net to defend his title with sheer courage. When Carlos Alcaraz walks out for the opening game of his first-round match, ignore the scoreline. Ignore the aces. Watch the very first defensive forehand he is forced to hit on the dead run. Watch his right hand at the point of contact. If he slides, plants, and whips that racket over his shoulder with zero hesitation, the rest of the draw is in serious trouble. But if you see him decelerate through contact, if he floats a slice back into the middle of the court to protect the joint, the fairy tale ends early. The first 10 minutes will tell you everything you need to know.